In this video, I'll be building up a brand new touring bike to take on my next trip. I have very high expectations of this bike because I want this bike to kind of do everything. It needs to be both comfortable and versatile. It will need to be able to carry a lot of weight and be robust enough to ride for thousands of miles without needing a lot of maintenance. I'll show the build process and talk through the gear choices I made along the way. My canvas is going to be this beautiful Soma Saga frame. I can't quite tell what year it's from, but the Saga line was discontinued back in 2016. By that time, the color was different, so my best guess is this one is from around 2011 based on these numbers I found on the fork steerer. Sadly, pretty much all nice rim brake touring bikes were discontinued, so I paid a pretty significant price to get my hands on this one. I bought it new old stock from a vendor at the Bike Jumble in Brooklyn, probably over 2 years ago. It was unbuilt and in terrific condition, with just a few small scratches on the paint job. It even had most of the paint cover still firmly attached. An uncut, lugged steel fork was also included with the frame. There were a few other features besides the clean condition that made me decide to buy this frame. Firstly, the tubing is very nice Tange Prestige steel. The fork was made from Tange tubing as well. It is full of nice, touring-focused details like this chainstay spoke holder, pump peg, and lots of eyelets for racks and fenders. It has nice relaxed geometry with a long head tube, making it a good fit for a comfort-focused build. The frame is a size 54, which believe it or not came in 3 different wheel sizes, mine being a 26er. I'm not sure how true this is anymore, but the conventional wisdom was to favor 26-inch wheels for bikes that may be ridden into remote or lesser developed areas, because replacing a 26-inch tire would be easier than any other size. Now the problem is sort of reversed, where it's becoming harder to find 26-inch wheels in the States, for example, and the selection for 26-inch tires is also seemingly shrinking. Still, I find myself riding 26ers all the time, and find a few great reasons to keep using them. The first reason is I never have toe overlap issues with 26ers. I tend to ride medium-sized frames, and this problem is much worse for smaller frames, yet I still have had issues with excessive toe overlap on several of my 700C bikes. Secondly, I've never broken a spoke on a 26er. All other things being equal, shorter spokes are going to be stronger than longer ones. Also, 26ers almost always fit wider tires than similar 700C bikes, so they can handle rougher terrain and generally ride more comfortably. I think there's still a bunch of great options for quality 26-inch tires, so I don't mind committing to them for this build. One of the first decisions I had to make was which headset to go with. I have a few brand new ones to choose from. A really nice choice would be this brown Chris King headset, which is about as nice as they get, but I think that might be a little too blingy for this build. This FSA headset is super massive and overbuilt. It would be better suited for a mountain bike, I would think. The last two options are this WTB, which I think would work fine, but I'll be going with this FSA headset instead, just because I think it looks a little cleaner. I installed the crown race on the fork and greased the head tube in preparation for the headset cups. The cups got pressed into the head tube, and I chose this nice silver Thompson stem to do my initial setup with. I will decide later whether or not to keep it in the final build. I will be cutting this steerer fairly long. I would like to have 40mm of spacers for a nice and upright setup. I can always move spacers to the top or cut it shorter later if I need to, but I want to avoid having to use a super tall stem to get the riding position I'm looking for. I marked the fork in preparation for the cut. I need to cut a few millimeters below the mark because the mark is just above the stem and the fork steerer needs to be a few millimeters below the top of the stem. Cutting a steel steerer is a whole lot less fun than the carbon one I last cut. I ended up replacing the saw blade to get a little bit more bite. There's a tiny bit of surface rust on the steerer that I cleaned up with some superfine sandpaper, and I greased the headset bearings thoroughly before the final install. This frame was in great shape and didn't require any cleaning, but like with all my builds, I gave it a waxing to make it look even better and give it a little more protection from water. I was pretty set on using this set of wheels for the project, primarily because they are my only brand new set of 26ers. They feature Alex DH19 rims and Shimano GR hubs. They have a high spoke count, and I think that would be a good fit for a touring bike build. The one small complaint I have is they use straight gauge spokes instead of butted ones, which are both lighter and stronger. I still think these wheels are going to hold up well, and they come with these nice Shimano skewers with enclosed cams. I installed some cloth rim tape before adding tubes and tires. The tires I chose were these Schwalbe road cruisers, and I picked them for a couple different reasons. I actually have some arguably nicer folding 26er tires to choose from, but the frame only has clearance for 2.1-inch tires, and these are all a bit wider. I didn't want to cut it close with the frame, especially if I decide to use fenders. The road cruisers do have a reasonably supple and grippy casing with a good tread profile and some added flat protection, so they're a fine place to start. If I plan on doing rides to more remote areas or rougher surfaces, I will probably replace them with something more beefy. Some of you may not know this, but there is a reason besides convention and aesthetics to line up the valve with the middle of the label. If the tube is shoved any old way into the tire and you get a flat, there's no easy way to figure out what part of the tire the flat came from. It can be hard to locate a tiny thorn or piece of glass that can cause repeated flats, but it helps to know which part of the tire to search. If you line up the tube and tire, you just need to look around the same area relative to the label, where the flat is on the tube relative to the valve. Okay, now for one of the most important decisions I had to make. I had to choose a handlebar. I will say I waffled back and forth between a bunch of choices going into the build. My previous touring bike had my DIY alt bars, which I have a video about if you want to know more. They were great and I rode them for years, but there's one issue that made me decide to go in another direction here. I found the main position where the brakes are to be a bit too narrow and didn't provide ideal control on descents. I may return to them later on, but for now I want to try something new. Now let's meet the contestants. First up is a set of Surly corner bars. They are wide and offer lots of control while also having multiple hand position options. Up next is a set of Velo Orange Crazy bars. I bought these ages ago and have been trying to figure out which build to install them on. They're similar to the corner bars with a wide swept back main position, along with extensions which allow for a lot of hand positions. Another option is the super silly bar with built-in basket. I actually really like the design and would love to have the basket, but they're super heavy and not entirely practical, so they're going to be eliminated for this build. The dark horse in the race is this set of riser drop bars. I recently installed them on my Crux and found them to be much more comfortable than regular drops on there before. I'll definitely make a video about those at some point, but for this build I really don't want to use drop bar shifters or brake levers. That leaves me with two options, the corner bars and the crazy bars to choose between, and the winner is going to be the crazy bars. I hope the matching silver stem didn't give it away. I think the crazy bars are just a bit more versatile, but I intend to give the corner bars a try in the near future as well. Regardless of the rest of the drivetrain choices, I plan on using a Hollowtech 2 style bottom bracket and crankset. I know a lot of people prefer square taper, but I find external bottom bracket cups a lot easier to service and replace. I have them on pretty much all my bikes and found them to last a long time without creaking or breaking down. Many people refuse to build a touring bike with any parts that cannot be serviced on the road, like a cartridge bearing for example, but I'll take my chances with this one. Now I was going to cut this part out, but I'm just going to have to vent for a little bit. As you can see, the tool in my hand does not fit this bottom bracket cup, but why? It's a Hollowtech 2 cup just like the tool. I previously installed a fancy XTR version into my Klein, and it had this adapter included with it. But this adapter doesn't fit this bottom bracket either. As it turns out, the XT version of the Hollowtech 2 bottom bracket uses yet a third size of BB cups, which has its own plastic adapter. So now that's 3 different size tools, with several of them fitting maybe 1 or 2 versions of the cups. Really not fun. In the future, I'll avoid the fancy ones and use the regular one that uses the larger tool. Luckily, my friend Alan had the exact adapter I needed, so I was able to get this thing tightened and move on with my build. I had a major decision to make on the drivetrain. I initially wanted to go with 11 speed because I have a few nice cassettes with a huge range like 11 to 42. If I did choose 11 speed, my plan was to go friction shifting to avoid having to use a trigger shifter. Trigger shifters have lots of small moving parts, and they tend to get gummed up over time, which makes shifting difficult. I can easily disassemble it and service it at home, but it's super annoying to have to deal with on the road. The problem is I don't have any friction shifters that would have enough range for an 11 speed cassette. There are a few options out there that I can order, but I chose to go another route. I decided to go with a 9-speed setup instead. For me, 9-speed is the sweet spot between price, performance, and easily available parts with lots of mixing and matching opportunities. I can use any Shimano derailleur from the 7 to 9-speed era and it will index fine with 9-speed shifters. I can go friction and any friction shifter will reach all the gears. The chain, cassette, shifters, and everything else are all pretty inexpensive and the shifting is plenty smooth and reliable. Now that that's decided, it's time to choose a crank. I really wanted to use this brand new Shimano Dior Double because it has this huge range between the gears. It's for 10-speed drivetrains, but I haven't had any issues running 10-speed cranks with 9-speed chains in the past. Instead, I picked this Olivio crankset I took off of a bike I recently bought specifically because it has 165mm arms. I prefer a shorter crank arm and I found them a little bit more difficult to find than the standard 170 and 175. The crank is a little scratched up and the previous owner put a single chainring on there, but I bought some brand new 9-speed triple rings to install on there instead. I actually only bought the middle and inner ring because I seldom feel I need the higher gears, but want to ensure I have lots of lower gears for hilly rides. To that end, the cassette I picked was the widest 9-speed I had, which was 11 to 36 teeth. That made my lowest gear combo at 2236 and the highest at 3211. For the front derailleur, I wanted to go shiny and vintage, but the high clamp was going to mess with the bottle cage bolts, so I used a low clamp Duo triple. Before installing a rear derailleur, I got to use my favorite new tool, which checks the alignment of the derailleur hanger. Having it perfectly parallel to the cassette is important for smooth shifting. A tiny bend is difficult to see and fix, but this tool allows you to measure the distance from different points along the rim, which exaggerates any misalignment and allows for fine adjustments by bending the hanger with the tool. Once I was satisfied with the hanger, I needed to choose a rear derailleur. I was inclined to use my favorite one, which is this XT. It's the last of Shimano's 9-speed mountain bike drivetrain before 10-speed changed the pull ratios and made it hard to mix and match components. However, I decided to go with this LX instead because it had a barrel adjuster built in. For ease of use and reliability, I decided to use this 9-speed index thumb shifter for microshift. I may decide to switch it for a friction version in the future, but I think thumb shifters are much less likely to experience issues than the ones with millions of tiny plastic gears on the inside. I needed to install a downtube cable stop. I chose this one with the small lever built into it, but for the other side, I decided on a downtube shifter. This is a type of setup that has been getting popular lately. The front shifter doesn't get nearly as much use, so it's less inconvenient to place it on the downtube. It's a friction shifter, so I can easily switch to a triple or a different crank whenever I want and not have to worry about cable pull ratios. Having the rear shifter on my bars, though, is definitely more convenient, so I'll be giving this setup a go for a while. I connected the chain and went about adjusting the front derailleur. I made sure the cage wasn't going to touch the frame and adjusted the limit screws until it seemed to be shifting decently well. I'll have to keep an eye on it and see if the chain tries to jump off the higher chainring because it's intended to be used as a middle and a triple. So far it looks okay in the stand. I got the rear shifter working as well and tuned up the indexing. I'm using V-brakes here and I had a nice set of silver Tektros to match the rest of the silver parts. Say what you will, but I find they have more than enough stopping power, even when wet. They're also cheap, light, and easy to maintain and set up. This is one hill I do intend to die on. The cables were routed and the brakes are ready to go. I decided to keep the cables kinda long for now to make it easy to make adjustments to the fit later on and to make it easier to run a front bag, which I definitely will be adding in the near future. I added a nice shiny seat post and went with the same synthetic Brooks saddle I've been riding on my other bike. I like these one-sided SPD pedals that are flat on the other side, so I can wear any shoes I want to when I ride. After a couple of small finishing touches, the bike build was complete. Check it out. So is this the perfect touring bike? I won't know until I've had a chance to put thousands of miles onto it, but I did take it out for its maiden voyage to the local park. This is the only time I'll be riding the bike so naked. It is intended to be a touring bike, and I will be outfitting it with all kinds of racks and bags. I may do a short follow-up video to show it all loaded up. My early impressions of the build are quite positive. I like how upright it is, though I'm not completely sat back with a straight back like on a cruiser. I sometimes find being too upright isn't comfortable for climbing or descending, so hopefully my position on this one will be a little more sporty. I also like the extensions. They are sort of like having aero bars and allow me to shift my weight significantly forward, which will be nice for going uphill. I really like these grips that I ordered a while back from Germany. They have terrific ergonomics and are made out of this nice looking cork material. I find they seem to cup my hand perfectly. I put grips on the extensions as well for now, though I may decide to use bar tape in the future and get a little more hand real estate over there. This build is not especially light, but doesn't feel obnoxiously heavy either. I don't mind a little extra weight if it makes the bike more comfortable, durable, and capable of carrying all my stuff. I do really like the positioning of the shifter so far. I don't see myself making any big changes until I've had a chance to do some longer rides on this bike. I have some big plans for it, so I want to really dial it in the coming days. I do have a very important decision to make though, which is whether I should switch to silver headset spacers to match the stem and bars, or leave them black to match the headset. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks for watching.